Kembali Anda bersama saya Tjut, Nyak, Deviana, Daudsjah di Daya Indonesia Fine Arts Academy bersama Veronica Nunn, jazz vokalis dari New York, Amerika Serikat, USA. Masih mengenai jazz vokal. Jadi di episode yang lalu Veronica menjelaskan atau menceritakan sedikit mengenai sejarah jazz di Amerika Serikat. Di episode yang ini kita akan membicarakan mengenai jazz, perkembangan jazz di New Orleans, jadi mulai sekitar tahun 1900. Okay. Veronica.
Hi, Devi. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you. And you? Okay, as I can see on your back side. Jazz spoken here, right? With
jazz spoken here. Absolutely.
With the peace sign.
Peace.
Okay. Yeah. We would like to hear from you about the New Orleans times, or around 1900, with the artist styles and those artists that represent the styles and beginning of jazz.
Yes. Okay. Well, before I kind of start, I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
What is your definition of jazz?
Oh, that is, well, if I would have to answer that question, that would take one library. Yeah. Well, I can only say spontaneously jazz is about life. It's about experience and improvisation.
Yes.
That's a very short answer.
Yes, but it's actually an excellent answer because I did a lot of research to try to find out, to find the definition of it all on the internet. I talked to a lot of jazz musicians. And there isn't one definitive way. There's so many ways in which it's described as an art form. So you're right in the category with everybody when it comes to, It's just a lot of things. But improvisation is one of the major things, I believe, that they've all said or agreed upon. And life, that is life experience. Which also kind of brings us around to the jazz. I was also looking at all the different names of jazz that they have. And I'll go into that later. But with jazz vocal, which kind of works with jazz in itself, it's sprung out of jazz, right? And it can be defined, they say, as the instrumentalist approach to the voice. They try to sound like an instrument, and they will do scatting, which is kind of nonsensical syllables around.
How about one example? Jazz scatting.
I'm not very good at scatting. I think you're better at scatting than I am. You should give us an example.
Okay.
They use nonsensical syllables like shuababi, uparabarubi, bebop, shuaba, those kind of things. Some of them were, I know it's hard to do it unless you have some music behind you, but and I'm not a great scatter, but somehow or another the jazz and the jazz music itself and the scatting came about, and this is which will bring us to the 1900s, but what we're going to talk about is the New Orleans period of time. So now, I had mentioned that that we had the minstrel shows, and then out of the minstrel shows came the vaudeville, and then but in that period of time too, there was also this thing called the Jim Crow, which prompted a lot of activity around the African Americans, which is why when you come to New Orleans, everything is different. Everything is very different. Because New Orleans is a multiracial, multicultural French rural city. And it really embraced music and all the cultures of the African Americans. And the Creole music combined the elements of West African work songs that we had mentioned before in the last episode, slave spirituals and vaudeville shows, which I had mentioned, and also rural blues. But on top of that, they also added the European brass instruments and the harmony. And by doing that, we kind of come to ragtime. you're familiar with the ragtime, like some of the artists that you know. What are some of the artists you know for ragtime?
Scott Joplin, for instance.
Yes, absolutely. And then there's stride piano style, where it's James P. Johnson. Of course, the great Fats Waller was more popular later, but he was also with the stride piano. But we come to, and also I wanted to mention, in the 1900s with the ragtime and the stride, we're moving now more toward, out of the teens, toward the 20s. And the 20s changed everything because that decade marked the invention of the phonograph and radio. And radio was in the homes of whoever who could afford it in America, across America. So for the first time, Americans were able to hear all different kinds of music. A lot of African American oral traditions, and it was broadcast to the whole world. Now, before I get to my favorite person out of New Orleans, with the beginning of radio and the phonograph, they developed these records called race records. Right. And race records were made specifically for a Black audience. And it was believed that different races had different tastes, different musical tastes. And race records contained, a whole variety of American types of music, like jazz, blues, gospel, and it even had comedy on these race records. Whites started listening more to all of these race records, and they started really enjoying this, and they started buying this. So now all of the blues and the jazz and the things that came out that were specifically on these records are now available to everyone. And out of this came an incredible gentleman. Everybody knows him as Louis Armstrong. Yeah. He was born in 1901, and he's been actually considered, the most influential artist in the history of music itself. But what he did was he perfected the improvised jazz solo. That's what we all kind of know. And the thing that's interesting is that before Armstrong, Dixieland, which I had mentioned earlier, was a style that everybody was playing, but it was a style where everybody kind of soloed at the same time. So there wasn't this section break where, the one instrument would then improvise over everything. So it's believed that Louis Armstrong, that he actually discovered this and started using this. And it's also believed that he invented the form of jazz singing. He realized that he could improvise while he's singing, but not just singing the melody like a lot of singers have, but he could kind of play around with the melody and phrase it he would with his trumpet. He was also considered, legend has it, that he is the originator of scat singing. Now there's this false legend that he invented scatting because one time when he was recording in 1926 the song called Heebie Jeebies, he dropped his sheet music on the floor, and that's what prompted scatting. But that's not true. And he isn't the inventor of scatting. No, it's not true.
That is what they told people about. And that's when he forgot the lyrics and then he started singing. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So people think he actually was the originator, but cats like Don Redman and Cliff Edwards and Red Nichols, they had recorded scatting before Armstrong, earlier than Armstrong. So, but Heebie Jeebies really got everything moving. And since with the records, Louis Armstrong was admired and liked by so many people that it just had a wide audience that he was able to, to connect to. And he was a very innovative type of singer. So he had, as you demonstrated, your kind of voice. he had that gravelly voice, but it was unique unto him. And that's the beginning, I think, of jazz singing, is to have a uniqueness to how you go about singing. So now, have any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
According to the history, there was a lady mentioned. Of course, I mean, there were more blues singers, but the history said that they also had an influence to the development of jazz. For instance, Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are actually, it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that, because there are a lot of singers. I'm just gonna, there's a woman named Lizzie Miles, Chippy Hill, Ivy Marie Anderson, Jim Rushing, Ida Cox, and even Alberta Hunter. Who actually, she kind of come back in there. But the real blues thing, the classic thing, started with this woman in the 1920s named Mamie Smith. And she began this whole crazy blues thing because she was kind of like the first person that got recorded. And she was also one of the fronts in the band. And, there's that, the singers always have problems with musicians because they are ones in front, and they don't get the attention that the musicians get. And, that was a problem in that day as well.
Well, that problem is also today it's the same, It's the same.
They still have a problem with singers and because they are famous, but or that they're on the spotlight and people can see them. But Mamie Smith was an American vaudeville singer. She was a dancer. She played the piano. She was an actress, but she was one of the first to make a vocal blues recording, and she did it with Willie the Lion Smith. Okay, and then after she started it, now we go into Ma Rainey. Ma Rainey was known as the mother of the blues.
Right.
And she had a very powerful vocal ability. She had very energetic. She was really raw. She had a moaning style. And very through folk tradition, but she was really, really raw. I mean, she had I think they said she had gold teeth things, and she wore a lot of gaudy jewelry.
Yeah. I saw a picture.
She just was really outrageous, and they even in 1982, August Wilson made a play called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which was on Broadway for a while. So then there was Ma Rainey, and then you brought up again Bessie Smith, and she was known as the Empress of the Blues. Okay. And she was actually the most popular of the blues singers because she made the most money. She was able to get past the recording problems. They had those real primitive recording methods in those days. So her voice just went beyond that. She was a powerful voice that just kind of went past all of that. And she was also into film. And she did Broadway. And she was also a big inspiration for Billie Holiday. Another person that came after Bessie Smith, I don't know how much time we have, but her name was Ethel Waters. And I don't think a lot of people know Ethel Waters there, but here in my country we do, because we saw her in a lot of movies that they had when they had Black African Americans in movies. But she was Bessie Smith's closest competitor in the 1920s. And she just kind of eventually surpassed Bessie in just being the first Black performer who was allowed, believe it or not, to interpret American songbook. It's funny how they didn't really allow you to even do that, and even or record it. So she had those songs like Dinah and My Blues, Stormy Weather, ones that I think a lot of us know. I don't know how much time I have, but, that was during the 20s. These singers were strong influences. And to bring us up past this, in 1920, there was a thing called the Volstead Act. and it prohibited the sale of alcohol. But that didn't stop Harlem.
That's the time of that song.
Harlem, I mean, liquor flowed freely.
Well, I remember one song during that time is that Crazy Rhythm, here's another crazy rhythm. Right, that was Al Capone.
Yeah. The one that Fats Waller does called "This Joint Is Jumping, It's Really Jumping." Got your hats on me. Yeah, so it's in Harlem it was just open, free booze. People would come up, and blacks and whites started mixing together because that was where they could get, they could get, how do they call it, tight. But also in that period in the 20s, with that happening, another section happened called the Harlem Renaissance. Yeah. And Harlem Renaissance was 2 decades. And that was when jazz and jazz vocal blew wide open. I mean, all of the singers we'll talk about later that started young, but then as time went on, they reached real notoriety at that period of time when the Renaissance occurred. So, you have any questions?
Well, I have a lot of questions, and then I will ask you all these questions in our next episode, right?
Beautiful.
Okay,
Beautiful.
So that was briefly about 1920s.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
I'm going to just say something to our honorable viewer. Barusan saja Veronica menjelaskan sedikit tentang bagaimana perkembangan jazz vokal di sekitar tahun 1920. Maka sampai di sini dulu episode ini. Bersama saya Tjut, Nyak, Deviana, Daudsjah, dan Veronica Nunn dari Amerika Serikat, jazz vocalist. Kita akan bertemu kembali di episode berikutnya. Right, so we will see us again in the next episode, and we're going to be talking about the 1920 to the 40 to the bebop, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, jadi sampai berjumpa kembali di episode berikutnya di Daya Indonesia Fine Arts Academy bersama Tjut, Nyak, Deviana, Daudsjah sekali lagi, dan Veronica Nunn dari Amerika Serikat. Salam musikal.